We are back for week 3 of the Lars Sew Along. I can't believe it's already here.
We've made so much great progress on our dress already, and we're excited to keep going.
So today we're going to go over 3 different things. First is the neckline binding, and second,
the sleeve bindings, including these fabulous little bows.
And the third is the hem.
Meet you at the machine! The first step of doing our neckline binding is going to be to sew 2 rows of gathering stitches along the neckline. The gathering stitch is a long, loose stitch, somewhere between a 3 and a 5 stitch length on your machine. I'm going to go for about a 4.5 stitch length. You're going to sew your first row of gathering stitches at 3/8 of an inch, and your second row of gathering stitches at 5/8 of an inch. This is so that when you go to sew your binding on with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, that row of stitching will be nicely in the middle of those 2 gathering stitches to create nice, even gathers. And as you sew these stitches, remember that your seam allowance should be pressed towards your sleeves. When you finish sewing, make sure to leave long thread tails. Now over here at the ironing board, we're going to take our neckline binding strip, we're going to press it in half, and then we're going to press it towards the center crease on both sides, just like that. Now that you've prepared your bias binding, we're going to start gathering the neckline. On each side of the neckline, at where it meets the opening, you're going to gently pull on the top set of threads. This will cinch in the fabric so that it begins to gather. You're going to keep cinching the fabric until it matches the length of your bias tape at the notches. Gathered the neckline quite a bit. I'm going to find this notch on my bias tape and match it with the end of my neckline. I'm going to repeat this on the other side of the neckline. As you can see, now our bias tape is a lot longer than our neckline, so we're going to have to release some of these gathers. So we're just going to adjust this neckline until it's the same length of the section of the bias tape between the notches. The excess bias tape on the ends will become the tie. Okay, so that's now about the same length. And so now I'm just gonna go in and by hand, just adjust these gathers until I feel like they look really even. If you'll see right now, this spot's really gathered and this spot's really flat. So we just want to adjust that so it's about the same amount of gathered all throughout. Okay, now that I feel like the gathers are well distributed, I'm gonna go in and pin this all the way around the neckline. Now that you've got your bias tape pinned to your dress, we're going to take it to the machine and sew it in place. It's important to note here that I've chosen to pin mine with the right side of the bias tape facing the wrong side of my dress. Personally, I feel like this leads to a neater finish. Some sewists might prefer to sew the right side of the bias tape to the right side of the dress. It's personal preference. We're going to sew this in place with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. If you were sewing with the neckline binding facing up, you could sew right along the crease we created earlier. Otherwise, if you choose to sew like I have with the gathers facing up, you can just sew with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Make sure to backstitch when you start and stop. For the next step in our neckline binding, we're going to fold this edge over to cover the line of stitching that we just sewed. Just like this. And we're going to keep pinning all the way down. At the ties, we're going to do the same thing, just fold in half, and then we'll have these beautifully encased ties. When you get to the end, you'll unfold your tape, fold in by about 1/2 inch, fold your bias tape back together, fold it in half again, and then you'll have a nicely enclosed edge. Find it really bulky at this seam, you may choose to trim it by just a little bit to make it easier to fold that edge over. I'm just going to trim off a little bit of this. Don't like to trim off too much because then it gets floppy. Now that your neckline binding is on and looking beautiful, you can go ahead and remove any exposed basting stitches that might be left over from when we gathered the fabric. Now that your beautiful neckline is done, it's time to tackle the sleeve bindings. The sleeve binding process is very similar to the neckline binding process. You're simply going to follow those steps again, but instead of doing the neckline, you'll be working on the much smaller sleeve. As you're sewing gathering stitches on your sleeve, make sure that you press your seam allowances towards the front because they're connected to the side seams, which are connected to the pockets, and that way the pockets will be pressed toward the front. Once again, we're going to be leaving long thread tails. The very final step of your dress is to sew the hem. We're so excited that we've made it this far. To sew the hem, you're gonna take your dress over to the ironing board and press the fabric to the wrong side by 1/2 inch. Then you'll take your iron and go around again, pressing it over another 1/2 inch. Then you'll sew it all in place, snip your threads, and you're all done. As you're pressing your hem, make sure that you press your side seams towards the front. This ensures that the pockets will stay in the front, which is where it's most comfortable to put your hands in them.
Well, we made it. Did you make it out alive? Caroline, thank you so much for walking us through that amazing dress.
You are so welcome. It's been a total joy to be here.
You are a total joy, and I hope your dresses are a total joy. Again, we would love to see it. The beauty of having a sew along with a community is that we can all see each other's work and encourage each other along. So please share to our hashtag Lars Sew Along and a Lars Dress, and invite others to participate. I think that's part of the fun.
We look forward to seeing all of your dresses on social media this week, and good luck with your sewing journey beyond.
All right, take care. Bye.